you dare to call me when I'm so busy?
Hello, magic lawyers. Warlocks are one of the most flavorful D&D classes, giving the edgiest amongst us plenty of plot hooks to make characters around. Liches are one of the most flavorful monsters, allowing the philosophicalists amongst us to wax poetic about hubris and other things that villains like to wax poetic about. So what happens if we mash these two together like a kid playing with action figures? Well, I'm Antonio D'Amico, this is Pointy Hat, and we're about to find out because we're making a brand new Warlock Lich in this baby spanking new episode of Witch Lich Warlock Edition. Finally! I knew you guys were screaming and crying about this one happening in our little undead dog and pony show, but it needed time to cook. Why? Because Warlocks are so dang inspirational, beloved, whatever you want to say.
She's an icon, she's a legend.
I made a whole video about explaining why, but I think they're just the class that is most conducive to making interesting characters, because they're just littered with plot hooks that basically hold your hand through coming up with a cool character in character creation. They give you an interesting backstory by default by making you come up with a reason as to why your character would make a pact with the daddy from outer space or whatever you have chosen as your sugar patron.
Daddy, chill.
They give you cool limitations and possibilities for your DM to mess with you in interesting ways with a contract that you are bound to follow. And then they sort of fall face first on the ground by being all about choosing options only to make it so it's better for you to click on the same cantrip for every single turn of combat. Like 90% of the time. As I said, I made a whole video about this and my humble proposal on fixing it. Go watch it if you want. So a Lich Warlock needs to measure up to all that. It needs to be big. It needs to be inspiring. It needs to be interesting. What was that? James? Oh, yeah. So for those of you that don't know, there's sort of a Lich-shaped thingy in the Warlock's general direction.
Meet the Deathlock.
Well, I guess since already exists, we don't need any of this anymore. We can just go home, and this is of course not. A surprising large amount of people said the Warlock wouldn't happen because Deathlocks are a thing, and I mean, do you know what a Deathlock is? Because it's not a Lich. So have you ever wondered what happens when a Warlock just fails to do their actual job? Do they get fired by their patron? Well, kinda. They get fired from life.
Life is so over.
If a Warlock dies before fulfilling their end of their magical mystical freelancer agreement with Lucifer or whoever they decided was a good idea to sign off their soul to, or if a Warlock is just like outstandingly bad at whatever they had to do for their Tinkerbell queen they serve, the patron will reanimate the remains of the Warlock into a Deathlock. That's what Deathlocks are. I became familiar with them after getting into Neverwinter Nights. Neverwinter Nights, gang, rise up. While the Deathlock retains a bunch of spells from back in the good old days when they were alive, with the designers even going through the effort of giving them a different spell list depending on the patron of the Deathlock, they also literally retain nothing else. In Mordenkainen Tome of Foes, which was the Deathlock's introduction to 5e, it's literally said that an overpowering urge to serve consumes the mind of a newly awakened Deathlock. All goals and ambitions it had in life that don't please the patron fall away. Its master's desires become the purpose that drives the Deathlock. If you're familiar with my recipe to make the perfect Lich, you'll know instantly that this is not how we do Liches around here. But even if you personally don't observe the almighty recipe, Deathlocks are CR4. Deathlock Masterminds, the Pokemon evolution, I guess, are CR8. These are babies, not close to the Lich's CR21 at all. Where's the soul jar? There is none. You can't have a Lich without a soul Tupperware. So yes, the Deathlock is indeed an undead Warlock. But the Deathlock is not a Lich, not even a little bit. It doesn't even choose to become a Deathlock. Hell, a zombie can be an undead Warlock, as in the reanimated corpse of one, but that doesn't make it a Lich. The Deathlock is also just not gonna cut it because it doesn't feel like a big bad. It doesn't feel like this thing that can carry a whole campaign on its own. You need a real big bad. Like, if you want a big bad Lich that feels Warlocky, imagine a Lich that has been trapped into some sort of dangerous relic and is currently acting as a patron to her half-crazed protege. The party could spend one part of the campaign dealing with that protege, thinking that she's the big bad, only to reveal that she's been working with a much more powerful Lich. Can you do that with a Deathlock? Absolutely not. But you can do that with the Book of Big Bads. That's one of the big bads in that book because it includes 31 big bads from CR 5 to a terrifying CR 30 and a compendium of 200 monsters to accompany those big bads. This is a 2-volume collection, and the big bads that are the star of the show are way more than just stat blocks. All of them come with full backstories, tactics for running them, which I love, and much, much more. And no, it's not just spooky liches. You have sea dragons, dragons, gelatinous mafia bosses. Look at all the art scrolling on the screen right now. So if this sounds good, and honestly it is, I love when stat blocks are made for me and I can take them and run or reflavor them into whatever I specifically need, especially with that much CR representation, which is the hardest thing to do. Go check out Big Bads at bigbads.com. It's the very first link in the description of this very video, and thank you for the sponsorship. And now that we have established why deathlocks can be liches, let's see what we need to make just that. So if the deathlock is not gonna cut it, it's because it doesn't really give us the lich essence. As I said, in order for a lich to feel like a lich, according to the list I put together myself, it has to have its own free will. It has to go through a ritual to become a lich, and it has to actively work for its undeath, connecting its soul to a soul Tupperware, or several, which serves as collateral in case the lich suffers a bit of an accident and dies, in which case it will just respawn next to it. Cool. So if that's what a baddie needs to feel lichy, what does a lich need to feel warlocky? Well, in order to find that, we need to distill the essence du Warlock.
Essence du Warlock.
What is a Warlock's essence? Is it Eldritch Blast? Yeah, it's probably Eldritch Blast. But other than Eldritch Blast, I think it's the Pact. The Pact is what makes the Warlock a Warlock. It's what differentiates it from every spellcasting class. From any class period, actually. A Warlock makes a pact to obtain their magic. But also, they make a pact with a patron, which is not only the subclass of the Warlock, but also an NPC that has an immense amount of power over the Warlock. The pact is what forces the Warlock to act in specific ways to please their patron. It affects everything about the Warlock. In order for a Lich to feel like a Warlock, it must heavily feature pacts in its design. But you know a thing that I wouldn't go as far as to call the essence of the Warlock, but is definitely something that will make anything feel Warlock adjacent? A catch. Becoming a Warlock is, without contest, the easiest way to become a spellcaster. You make a pact, and suddenly, you don't need to spend decades studying like the wizard. You don't need to understand the intricate religious rituals and worship of a god like the cleric. You don't need to learn to commune with nature and understand the source of primal magic like the druid. You don't need to be born special like the sorcerer, or engage in theater kidness like the bard. No, anyone can be a Warlock, and that's why there's a catch. You sign yourself away. You become a servant to a being so powerful it can grant you magical powers. If we can incorporate some of that into our Lich, some of that trade-off, I think it would make it feel even more like a Warlock Lich. So, how do we do that? Well, we said that pacts are the essence. We said that we want a catch. What if we start there? What if for this Lich, Lichdom is not at the end of a complicated ritual one must spend years preparing, but rather just one contract away? There's no form of Lichdom as easily attained as the one by signing the dotted line at the end of a Warlock's pact. A potential Warlock can find the right patron, and, in exchange for their mortal soul, they'll be granted the only form of Lichdom that can be gained through pact magic. No need for extended rituals or centuries of research, no corpse-like appearance and slowly decomposing flesh, only a mark of this first pact somewhere on their skin, signifying their status as that patron's faithful servant. Once a mortal and the powerful being have decided on the terms of the pact, the mortal dies and is not mortal anymore. They become both a Warlock and a Lich, a covenant. But ease and convenience has a price, and sometimes that price is much steeper than they are worth. No Warlock is more of a servant to their patron than a covenant, for their continued existence depends on it. The immortality of a covenant, like anything given to any Warlock, is conditional. The remaining lifespan of the covenant has not been extended in the slightest. Once it runs its course, the covenant will die like any other mortal. What has been given to the covenant is the possibility to extend their lifespan indefinitely, provided they serve their patron right. A covenant's immortality is contingent on how many other mortals they convince to sign other pacts with their patron. If the covenant wants to continue existing forever, they must convince as many as possible to enter contracts with their patron. Once they do, the mortal's remaining lifespan at the moment of the signing will be added to the lifespan of the covenant, and an additional mark to signify this contract will appear on the covenant's body. The more deals the covenant brings to fruition for their patron, the more the Lich's lifespan will grow. Conversely, every time a covenant is slain, they lose the lifespan gained in the oldest deal they facilitated. Just as a covenant can rise higher and faster than any other Lich, a covenant that is not careful can be brought down to their knees just as quick. The Covenant's soul jars are nothing other than the physical medium in which the contracts they facilitate are written. They guard them zealously, knowing just how important each of these soul jars are. not just as soldiers, but as the only thing allowing the Covenant to continue to enjoy their extended lifespan. If any of these is destroyed, not only does the Covenant lose a soul jar, they lose the lifespan associated with that specific pact. And it is so that the Covenant finds themselves embodying the unearthly charisma the Warlock is known for, forever chasing, tricking, and swindling the next mortal to add additional years to their lifespan like a parasite. At once impossibly powerful and yet weaker than any other Lich. In Lichdom, they found unbreakable chains. They sold their soul to become a Covenant. If they don't want to cease to exist forever, the Covenant will be a servant to their patron for the rest of their days. And now that they've become a Lich, this threatens to be many, many days. MLM Lich, how about that? Hey mama, wanna be your own boss? Wanna be part of Herba Unlife? But for real, imagine having a Lich that can access all that power with just signing a contract. It would stand to reason that the drawbacks for it would be pretty massive. Not only do they lose their soul in the process, they have signed for an eternity of servitude if they do their job right, and just for their natural lifespan if they don't. The fact that this is the only Lich in this predicament, the only Lich that loses lifespan this way, is also in line with the whole there's a catch aspect to Warlocks. And having their soul jar be the contracts they helped sign and the reason for them being Liches be a contract works so well to bring that Warlock flavor into the Lich. This might be the most active Lich yet on account of how much they have to do to maintain their Lich status. And it's because to me, this is the easiest version of playing a Lich. You don't have to work towards it throughout the campaign. You can just start as a Lich. Just make a Warlock with the Pact of the Undying or the Undead, and you can start playing this and make it your campaign's mission to make more contracts. Or not, maybe it's about accepting your own death, and that's the coolest part about playing a Lich. Depending on where on the lifespan of the Covenant you meet them during the campaign, they'll have to be in an extremely active period, desperately trying to extend their lifespan so that the sacrifice of their mortal soul is not in vain. It can so clearly be a villain, as the Covenant is incentivized to drive others to sign contracts that will put them in situations equally as precarious as the one they find themselves in, but they can be villains and be extremely easy to empathize with depending on the motivation you give them for actually becoming a Lich. If nothing else, they're bound to be driven, and that's what makes a compelling character, baby. But a monster is not truly an outstanding monster unless players have as many options to build characters around as the DM has for plot hooks to make adventures. So how about we come up with a character concept all about the Covenant? We've done a bunch of characters in this series that want to become the Liches they are associated with. How about we make one that can serve as 1, a PC backstory, and 2, a whole campaign arc for DMs to run. 2 birds with 1 stone. To give a little something for everybody. Let's go. Though he managed to enter the extremely prestigious Isora Academy of Arcane and Divine Studies, Jonai was never good at traditional spellcasting, and only managed to snag his seat among the student body for his uncanny knack and martial magic. He quickly went down the path of the Eldritch Knight, combining his prowess in combat for his knack for quick spellcasting in the heat of battle. Though he was intelligent enough to grasp arcane formulas, complex measurements of spell components, and long nights of study, he understood very quickly that that was simply not his forte. He was more than happy to leave that all to Gara, a girl from his same school that had grown up into an extremely gifted arcanist. She had a knack for executing complex rituals, was particularly gifted at runic engravings, and had the disposition to spend hours on end studying the subtleties of somatic casting. Gara quickly rose to the ranks of more traditional schooling at Isora Academy, so high, in fact, that someone took notice. Dean Chamaida, head of Isora Academy, quickly spotted how bright Gara shined amongst the rest of the student body, and took her under her wing. Every student that knew anything about how Isora Academy and the rest of the country worked knew exactly what this meant. Dean Chamaida liked to play favorites, and she did so openly and unashamedly. Those that had been lucky enough to be selected by her discerning eye had risen to extremely influential positions in the country. Dignitaries, ambassadors, merchant princes, Dean Chamaida had protégés in all fields worthy of note. Jonai knew this too, but instead of joining in the jealous gossip of his fellow students, Jonai could not feel happier for Gara, and the two remained friends throughout their years of study and into adulthood. And so, Chamaida took a bigger and bigger part in Gara's life. The Dean's promise was simple: follow her instructions and Gara would rise as high as she could ever dream of. Gara wanted nothing more than to become Grand Enchanter, the leader of all magic in the country, the one that decides how, when, and where arcane research is conducted. By the last year at Isora Academy, Gara and Jonai barely saw each other. Jonai knew Gara didn't mean to abandon him, and he would be loath to put himself between her and her dreams. In time, both of them graduated with honors in their respective fields of study, and they lost even the occasional run-in in the hallways, the last of their time spent together. Or that was until Gara came to Junai's door in the dead of night. Not even Gara, a simulacrum of her, bearing a strange mark on her neck. Gara had sent this arcane copy of herself to beg for Junai's assistance, as she had uncovered the truth behind the Dean of Azura Academy. Chamaida is a covenant, and she has convinced all of her proteges that making a deal with her patron, just like she herself had before, would be the final step in accomplishing all of their dreams. And Gara was no different. In reality, this was a ploy by Dean Chamaida to lengthen her lifespan and select extremely powerful soldiers in positions of political power that answer only to her and her patron. Gara and Junai concoct a plan. Junai will find the 4 proteges whose contracts serve as Chamaida's phylacteries, while Gara will continue to play along with Chamaida, assisting Junai behind enemy lines. A Covenant's phylactery can only be dispatched in 3 ways. Either the physical contract itself is destroyed, the terms of the pact are fulfilled and it therefore ends, or the Warlock attached to the contract dies. Junai, with Gara's assistance, must find these 4 Warlocks and somehow destroy the soldiers associated with each of them. Ateneri, the leader of the most vicious assassin guild in the country. She's a fervent believer in Chamaida, and the only one to make her deal knowing exactly what it entailed. She worshipped Chamaida to the point of obsession and could never be convinced to turn on her. Junai and her must fight. Ankor, a thaumaturge that specializes in divine magic studies in Azura Academy. He once tried to escape Chamaida's grasp, only for her to kill the one he loved most. He's lost all hope of ever escaping. But finding where Chamaida keeps his contract and destroying it might bring Ankor to Junai's side. Benkomo, a merchant prince and family man. He understands Chamaida is evil, but he has given his soul away for his family to be comfortable and content. He is just not willing to risk everything he's worked towards to topple Chamaida. But he might, if Junai can prove that Chamaida's next target is his own daughter. And finally, Dailos, a ruthless politician who has had a meteoric ascent in his short career. He hopes to one day use Chamaida, just like she is using her patron, to become a Lich himself. He is selfish and will fight anyone that meddles in his plans. But could he be convinced to switch sides if Junai finds a more enticing alternative for Dailos? And even if Junai manages to destroy all of these phylacteries, one way or another, what happens when Chamaida inevitably catches on to Junai and Gara's plans? What happens with Gara, the last of the soldiers? Must Junai put Gara through the sword so that Chamaida cannot leech off of more promising young talents? Or is there another way to defeat the last soldier of the Lich? Oh god, all these questions. Why are you asking me? I don't know. Just run this to see what happens. What? You mean that the Covenant is not real and only exists in this video so you can't run it? Are you new? Yes, the Covenant, the Warlock Lich, is in the description of this very video for 100% certified Pointy Hat free, and you better get used to it. You better go grab it. But if Warlocks are not your thing, how about Clerics? Cleric Lich, it's a cult leader. And if you like unconventional Liches, I mean, all of mine are, but if you like unconventional even for me, go check out the Monk Lich. That one is like a self-sustaining machine. All right, please read the fine print before you sign anything. Bye-bye. See you for the last Lich of this series, the Rogue Lich. Bye-bye. Mwah.
Or is it?